Captain Sarah, Ghost. Mitchell stood at attention in Admiral Harrison's office, her jaw clenched as she stared at the wall behind his desk. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Naval Air Station Oceana, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Outside, the sound of F-22 Raptors could be heard taking off for their morning training missions. "Captain Mitchell," Admiral Harrison began, his voice cold and dismissive. "Your performance review has been disappointing. Your attitude toward authority, your reckless flying style, and your complete disregard for protocol have made you a liability to this squadron." Sarah remained silent, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. She had served her country with distinction for 8 years, flying combat missions in 3 different theaters of war. Her record spoke for itself, but apparently, that meant nothing to Admiral Harrison. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, shuffling through papers on his desk, "Your recent unauthorized flight pattern during the joint training exercise with the Navy SEALs was the final straw. You put multiple lives at risk with your showboating." "Sir, with respect," Sarah finally spoke, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "That maneuver saved Lieutenant Commander Walsh's team from enemy fire. The mission was successful because of that decision." Admiral Harrison's face reddened. "Don't interrupt me, Captain. Your insubordination is exactly what I'm talking about. You think because you're one of the few female F-22 pilots, you can do whatever you want. Well, I have news for you." He stood up from his chair, his imposing figure casting a shadow over Sarah. "You are hereby relieved of duty and expelled from this base. You have 24 hours to clear out your quarters and turn in your equipment. Your security clearance is suspended pending further review." Sarah felt the world spin around her. 8 years of dedication, countless hours of training, and a perfect mission record meant nothing. "Sir, you can't do this. I have rights, proper channels to—" "The decision is final," Admiral Harrison cut her off. "Security will escort you out. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." 2 military police officers entered the office as if on cue. Sarah looked at them, then back at the Admiral. She had faced enemy fire, survived crash landings, and led rescue missions behind enemy lines. But this felt like the hardest battle she had ever fought. As she walked toward the door, Admiral Harrison called out one last time. "Oh, and Captain Mitchell, good luck finding another position in military aviation. I'll make sure everyone knows about your difficulties with authority." Sarah spent the next 18 hours packing her life into boxes. Her small quarters on base had been home for 3 years, filled with memories of camaraderie, training, and the brotherhood she thought would last forever. Fellow pilots stopped by to say goodbye, each one expressing shock and disbelief at the Admiral's decision. "This is wrong, Ghost," said Captain Marcus Torres, one of her closest friends in the squadron. "Everyone knows you're the best pilot we have. That maneuver you pulled last week was incredible." "Politics, Marcus," Sarah replied, taping up another box. "Harrison never liked having women in his squadron. He's been looking for an excuse since day one." Lieutenant Jennifer Park, another female pilot, sat on Sarah's now bare bunk. "What are you going to do? You can't just let him destroy your career like this." Sarah paused in her packing, holding a framed photo of her graduation from flight school. Her father, a decorated Air Force colonel, had been so proud that day. "I don't know yet, but I'm not giving up. Flying is who I am." The next morning, as Sarah loaded her car with her belongings, she took one last look at the flight line. The F-22 Raptors sat like sleeping giants, their sleek forms gleaming in the dawn light. She had spent countless hours in those cockpits, pushing the limits of both machine and human capability. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself, then drove through the base gates for what she thought might be the last time. 3 months passed in a blur of rejection letters and closed doors. Sarah had applied to every military aviation position available, but Admiral Harrison's influence reached far and wide. Private contractors wouldn't touch her, citing concerns about her military record. Commercial airlines were hesitant to hire someone with such a specialized background and recent disciplinary issues. Sarah found herself working as a flight instructor at a small civilian airport in Nevada, teaching weekend warriors how to handle single-engine Cessnas. It was honest work, but every day felt like a step further away from the life she had built for herself. One evening, as she was closing up the hangar, her phone rang. The number was blocked, but something told her to answer. "Captain Mitchell?" The voice was unfamiliar, gravelly, and spoke with authority. "Yes, this is Sarah Mitchell. Who is this?" "My name is Colonel James Burke. I'm calling about a position that might interest you. Are you familiar with the 447th Air Expeditionary Group?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The 447th was a classified unit, one of those organizations that officially didn't exist but carried out some of the most important missions in the military. "I've heard rumors," she said carefully. "We need pilots, Captain. Pilots who can think outside the box, who aren't afraid to make tough decisions, and who can handle aircraft that push the boundaries of what's possible. Your record before your recent troubles is impressive." "What kind of aircraft?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The kind that don't officially exist, Captain. The kind that need pilots who can disappear and do impossible things. Are you interested in a conversation?" Sarah looked out at the small planes tied down on the tarmac, then up at the stars beginning to appear in the desert sky. "When and where?" "Tomorrow night, Las Vegas. I'll send you details. And Captain?" This conversation never happened. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone. After months of dead ends and disappointment, suddenly a door had opened. But she knew that walking through it would mean entering a world where the rules were different, where missions had no names, and where pilots like her could disappear entirely. As she drove home that night, Sarah thought about Admiral Harrison and his smug certainty that he had ended her career. Little did he know that sometimes the best pilots were the ones who refused to stay grounded, no matter who tried to clip their wings. The desert wind whipped through her open windows as she pressed harder on the accelerator, eager to see what tomorrow would bring. Behind her, the small airport grew smaller in her rearview mirror, and ahead lay possibilities she had never imagined. 2 days later, Sarah found herself in a windowless room in a building that didn't appear on any map, talking to men and women whose names she would never know. They spoke in code about missions that didn't exist and aircraft that were decades ahead of anything the public had ever seen. "Your call sign will be Phoenix," Colonel Burke told her, as she signed papers that would legally erase her existence from most military databases. Rising from the ashes seemed appropriate. As Sarah signed the final document, she smiled for the first time in months. Admiral Harrison thought he had ended her story, but he had actually just written the first chapter of something much bigger. The Phoenix was about to rise, and when she did, everyone would remember why they had once called her Ghost. 2 years had passed since Sarah Mitchell officially ceased to exist. In her place stood Phoenix, a pilot whose reputation had become legend among the most elite military units in the world. She flew missions that were never recorded, in aircraft that defied conventional understanding of aerodynamics and stealth technology. The 447th Air Expeditionary Group operated from bases that shifted like shadows, appearing and disappearing based on global needs. Sarah had flown over hostile territories in the Middle East, provided close air support for operations in Eastern Europe, and conducted reconnaissance missions that prevented 3 potential international incidents from escalating into full-scale conflicts. Her aircraft was unlike anything she had ever imagined. Officially designated as the X-47 Phoenix, it combined the best features of the F-22 Raptor with experimental technology that wouldn't see public deployment for decades. It could fly higher, faster, and more quietly than any fighter jet in the world, and its weapons systems were so advanced that Sarah sometimes felt like she was piloting a spacecraft rather than an airplane. Colonel Burke had become more than a commanding officer. He was the father figure Sarah had lost when her own father died during her second year with the 447th. Burke understood what it meant to be a pilot who lived in the shadows, who sacrificed everything for missions that would never be acknowledged. "Phoenix, you have a new assignment," Burke said, entering the briefing room where Sarah was reviewing flight data from her previous mission. "This one's different, personal." Sarah looked up from her tablet, noting the unusual tension in Burke's voice. "How personal?" "Admiral Harrison is requesting our assistance." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in 2 years, though she thought about her former commanding officer every day. The man who had destroyed her career, who had tried to end her dreams of flying, was now asking for help from the shadows. "What does he need?" Sarah asked, her voice carefully neutral. Burke slid a classified folder across the table. 3 days ago, a Navy SEAL team was captured during a reconnaissance mission in hostile territory. Standard extraction protocols have failed. The area is too heavily defended for conventional rescue operations, and political considerations prevent official military intervention. Sarah opened the folder, her eyes scanning the mission details. The location was a mountainous region known for its treacherous weather and heavy anti-aircraft defenses. The captured team included Lieutenant Commander David Walsh, the same officer whose life Sarah had saved during the training exercise that had ultimately led to her expulsion from Naval Air Station Oceana. "Walsh," she said quietly. "He was one of the SEALs who defended me when Harrison was building his case for my dismissal. The Admiral specifically requested our most experienced pilot for this mission," Burke continued. "He doesn't know it's you, Phoenix. Your identity is classified above his clearance level." Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing the irony of the situation. The man who had called her reckless and dangerous was now relying on her skills to save lives. "What's the mission parameters?" "Low-altitude insertion, electronic warfare suppression, and precision extraction under fire. The kind of mission that requires a pilot willing to make split-second decisions and bend every rule in the book. The kind of mission Admiral Harrison said I was too reckless to handle," Sarah observed with bitter humor. Burke smiled grimly. "Sometimes the military needs reckless pilots, Phoenix. Sometimes following the rules gets good people killed." Sarah studied the mission details for several minutes, noting the extreme difficulty of the terrain and the sophisticated air defense systems in the area. It was exactly the type of mission she had trained for with the 447th, but it would push both her and her aircraft to their absolute limits. "When do we launch?" she asked. 1800 hours. You'll have a 6-hour window before weather conditions deteriorate beyond safe flying parameters." As Sarah prepared for the mission, she thought about the twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. Admiral Harrison, who had seen her unauthorized maneuver as evidence of her unfitness for duty, was now depending on exactly that kind of creative thinking to save his men. The X-47 Phoenix sat in its hangar like a predator waiting to hunt. Its sleek black surface absorbed light rather than reflecting it, and its unusual wing configuration gave it an otherworldly appearance. Sarah ran her pre-flight checklist with the precision of someone whose life depended on every detail being perfect. "Phoenix, you are cleared for departure," came the voice of Mission Control through her helmet communications. "Roger, Control. Phoenix departing the nest." The aircraft lifted off with an almost supernatural quietness, its advanced engines producing none of the roar associated with conventional fighter jets. Sarah climbed quickly through the cloud layer, setting course for a destination that would test every skill she had acquired in her years as a pilot. As she flew toward the mission area, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Admiral Harrison had believed he was ending her career when he expelled her from the base. But instead, he had set in motion a series of events that had transformed her into something far more capable than she had ever been as a conventional military pilot. The irony was not lost on her that Harrison now needed the very qualities he had criticized. Her willingness to improvise, to take calculated risks, and to think beyond standard procedures were exactly what this mission required. 2 hours into the flight, Sarah reached the hostile airspace. Her radar showed multiple surface-to-air missile sites, but her aircraft's stealth capabilities kept her invisible to their targeting systems. She dropped to low altitude, using the mountainous terrain to mask her approach. "Phoenix, this is Falcon Team," came a weak radio signal from the captured SEALs. "We are holding position at grid reference 77 Alpha. Heavy enemy presence. Extraction window is closing fast." Sarah recognized Walsh's voice immediately, though it was strained with exhaustion and pain. The SEAL team had been captured 3 days earlier, and she could hear the desperation in their communications. "Falcon Team, this is Phoenix," Sarah responded, using her mission call sign rather than the ghost identifier Walsh would remember. "I have your position. Beginning suppression of enemy air defenses now." What followed was 15 minutes of the most intense flying of Sarah's career. She used her aircraft's advanced weapons systems to systematically eliminate the enemy's defensive positions while avoiding detection by their remaining forces. Her years of experience with the 447th had taught her to fight like a phantom, striking precisely and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The extraction itself required a level of precision flying that would have been impossible in a conventional aircraft. Sarah brought the X-47 Phoenix down into a narrow mountain valley, hovering just long enough for the SEAL team to reach her aircraft's emergency rescue pod. "All Falcon team members aboard," Walsh reported. "Phoenix, you are cleared to extract." As Sarah climbed away from the hostile territory, she could hear the relief in the voices of the rescued SEALs. They had no idea that their savior was the same pilot Admiral Harrison had dismissed as too dangerous for military service. The flight back to base gave Sarah time to think about what would happen when Admiral Harrison learned the truth about his mysterious rescuer. She wondered if he would ever understand that the qualities he had seen as flaws were actually the strengths that had saved his men's lives. When the X-47 Phoenix touched down at the classified airfield, Colonel Burke was waiting on the tarmac with Admiral Harrison. Sarah could see them through her cockpit canopy, but they couldn't see her through the aircraft's tinted transparency. "Outstanding work, Phoenix," Burke's voice came through her communications. "Mission accomplished with 0 casualties." Admiral Harrison stepped forward, clearly wanting to meet the pilot who had achieved what his conventional forces could not. Sarah made a decision that would change everything that followed. Instead of remaining anonymous as protocol required, she decided it was time for Admiral Harrison to learn exactly who had saved his men. As she powered down her aircraft and began her post-flight procedures, Sarah smiled for the first time since receiving the mission briefing. The Admiral was about to discover that sometimes the pilots you dismiss are the ones who return to save you. Admiral Harrison paced back and forth on the tarmac as the mysterious X-47 Phoenix powered down its engines. He had spent the last 6 hours in a state of controlled panic, knowing that his best SEAL team was trapped behind enemy lines with no hope of conventional rescue. Now, thanks to this classified pilot, his men were coming home alive. "Colonel Burke," the Admiral said, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, "I need to meet this Phoenix pilot. What they accomplished today was nothing short of miraculous. That extraction was impossible by every tactical manual ever written." Burke glanced toward the aircraft, knowing what was about to unfold. "Admiral, perhaps we should discuss this in private first. There are some things about Phoenix that you should know." "Nonsense," Harrison replied, his eyes fixed on the cockpit as it began to open. "I want to shake the hand of the pilot who saved my men." This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking our military needs more of. The canopy of the X-47 Phoenix rose slowly, revealing the pilot within. Sarah Mitchell removed her helmet, her blonde hair falling to her shoulders as she began her post-flight shutdown procedures. She moved with the calm confidence of someone who had just completed another routine mission, though her heart was racing in anticipation of the confrontation to come. Admiral Harrison stopped pacing, his face going pale as recognition dawned. That's impossible." "Admiral," Burke said quietly, "meet Phoenix. I believe you two have met before." Sarah completed her shutdown checklist and climbed out of the aircraft. She walked toward the 2 officers with measured steps, her flight suit bearing no name tags or rank insignia that would identify her to casual observers. Only her confident stride and the way she carried herself revealed her identity as one of the world's most elite pilots. "Admiral Harrison," Sarah said, her voice calm and professional. "It's been a while." The Admiral's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. "Captain Mitchell? But you were... I expelled you from... How is this possible?" "I go by Phoenix now," Sarah replied. "And as for how this is possible, let's just say that sometimes when you close one door, the universe opens another one." Lieutenant Commander Walsh and his SEAL team approached the group, having been medically cleared by the base's emergency response team. Walsh's face showed the same shock as the Admiral's when he recognized their rescuer. "Ghost?" Walsh said, using Sarah's old call sign from their joint training exercises. "You're Phoenix? You're the one who pulled us out of that hellhole?" Sarah nodded. "Good to see you alive, Walsh. Sorry it took me so long to return the favor." Admiral Harrison looked between Sarah and his rescued SEALs, his mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. I don't understand. Your career was over. Your security clearance was revoked. You were completely unsuitable for military aviation. Apparently, some people disagreed with your assessment, Sarah replied. The 447th has a different perspective on what makes a good pilot. Burke stepped forward, sensing the need to diffuse the tension. Admiral, Phoenix has conducted 47 successful missions over the past 2 years. She has a perfect success rate in combat operations and has prevented multiple international incidents from escalating into full-scale conflicts. But she's reckless, the Admiral protested weakly. She doesn't follow protocols. She takes unauthorized risks. Walsh stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just survived an impossible situation. Admiral, with respect, that unauthorized risk-taking is what kept us alive today. Phoenix did things with that aircraft that shouldn't have been possible. She improvised solutions to problems that our standard playbook doesn't even address. The other rescued SEALs nodded in agreement. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, the team's demolitions expert, spoke up. Sir, we've worked with a lot of pilots over the years. What Phoenix did today was beyond anything we've ever seen. She turned an impossible rescue into a routine extraction. Admiral Harrison looked at the faces around him, seeing genuine respect and admiration for the pilot he had once dismissed as a liability. But the training exercise, he said, grasping for justification. She endangered lives with that maneuver. That maneuver saved our lives, Walsh said firmly. Just like today's mission saved our lives. Sometimes the book doesn't have all the answers, Admiral. Sarah had remained silent during this exchange, but now she stepped forward. Admiral, you were right about one thing. I don't always follow standard procedures. But sometimes standard procedures aren't enough. Sometimes you need someone willing to do the impossible. She gestured toward the X-47 Phoenix behind her. This aircraft is capable of things that conventional fighters can't do, but it requires a pilot who can think beyond conventional limitations. The military has dozens of pilots who can follow orders perfectly, but they needed someone who could write new orders when the old ones weren't sufficient. Admiral Harrison stared at the advanced aircraft, its alien-looking design a stark contrast to the conventional fighters he was familiar with. What is that thing? Classified, Burke responded simply. But what you can know is that it represents the future of military aviation, and pilots like Phoenix represent the future of military aviators. The Admiral turned back to Sarah, his expression showing a mixture of confusion, regret, and grudging respect. I was wrong about you. Yes, sir, you were, Sarah replied without malice. But you were wrong for the right reasons. You were trying to protect your squadron from what you saw as unnecessary risk. What you didn't understand was that sometimes the biggest risk is playing it safe. Walsh approached the Admiral, his expression serious. Sir, I need you to understand something. When we were captured, we knew that conventional rescue was impossible. The enemy had too many advantages, too much firepower, too much high ground. We were preparing to die rather than reveal classified information. He paused, looking at Sarah with genuine admiration. Then Phoenix appeared out of nowhere like something from a science fiction movie. She eliminated 12 separate threat positions without being detected, extracted us from a landing zone that was supposedly unusable, and got us home without a scratch. That's not reckless flying, Admiral. That's artistry. Admiral Harrison was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Finally, he looked at Sarah directly. Captain Mitchell, Phoenix, I owe you an apology. Not just for today, though what you did today was extraordinary. I owe you an apology for not seeing what you were capable of. Sarah nodded, accepting the apology with grace. Admiral, you saw a pilot who didn't fit the mold you were familiar with. You weren't wrong to be concerned. But the military needs different kinds of pilots for different kinds of missions. The kind of missions where failure means good people die, Burke added. Phoenix represents a new type of military aviator. Someone who can operate in the gray areas where conventional tactics don't apply. Admiral Harrison looked around at the faces surrounding him, all showing respect for a pilot he had dismissed as unfit for service. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. The very qualities he had criticized in Sarah were the qualities that had saved his men's lives. "What happens now?" the Admiral asked. Is there any way to make this right?" "You already have," Sarah replied. "You called for help when your men needed it most, and you trusted an unknown pilot to do an impossible job. That took courage, Admiral. The same kind of courage you were worried I lacked." Burke stepped forward with a slight smile. "Admiral, there is one thing you could do. Phoenix's work is classified, but her example isn't. The military needs more pilots who can think creatively under pressure. Perhaps you could help identify and develop that kind of talent in your squadrons." Admiral Harrison nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're asking me to look for pilots who don't quite fit the standard mold. We're asking you to remember that sometimes the best pilots are the ones who are willing to rewrite the rules when lives are on the line," Sarah said. As the group began to disperse, Admiral Harrison approached Sarah one final time. "Captain, Phoenix, thank you. Not just for saving my men, but for teaching me something important about leadership. I promise you, I'll remember this lesson." Sarah saluted, a gesture of respect rather than military protocol. "Admiral, every pilot wants to serve their country to the best of their ability. Sometimes that service takes forms we don't expect." As Admiral Harrison walked away, Walsh approached Sarah with a grin. "Ghost, I've got to ask. When you pulled us out of that valley today, did you know it was us you were rescuing?" Sarah smiled back. "I knew it was you from the moment I heard your voice on the radio. That made it personal." "And did you know that Admiral Harrison was the one requesting the mission?" "Burke told me during the briefing," Sarah admitted. "I'll be honest, there was a part of me that wanted to prove a point. But mostly, I just wanted to bring you and your team home safely." Walsh extended his hand, which Sarah shook firmly. "Well, consider your point proven. The Admiral will never forget this day, and neither will we." As Sarah walked back toward the classified hangar where the X-47 Phoenix was being secured, she reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 2 years earlier, she had driven away from Naval Air Station Oceana convinced that her military career was over. Today, she had returned as something she never could have imagined, a pilot whose capabilities exceeded anything Admiral Harrison had thought possible. The Phoenix had indeed risen from the ashes, and everyone who witnessed her flight would remember why some birds are meant to soar beyond the limits of conventional wisdom. In saving Admiral Harrison's men, Sarah had also saved a part of herself. The part that had always known that the best pilots are those who refuse to be grounded, no matter who tries to clip their wings. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the most important rules are the ones that haven't been written yet.